Okay, so good day everyone. Are you ready for another science lecture? I guess you're ready. So now let's start our lesson. So our topic for today is all about cell theory. Do you have any idea about cell theory? Okay, so may I request every one of you to close your eyes for a second and picture a brick wall. What is the basic building block of that wall? A single brick, correct, of course. So like a brick wall, your body is composed of building blocks. And that building blocks of your body is what you call the cells. So fortunately, your cells are way more interesting than bricks. So cells perform a huge number of different roles within your body. It may seem obvious that we and other living things are made of cells. Um, Prior to 1600s, however, it wasn't obvious at all for the simple reason that no one had ever seen a cell up close and personal. So to distinguish individual cells in a piece of tissue or individual bacteria in a sample of a liquid required the development of relatively high-powered microscopes. So what is microscope? It is a tool or instrument used for magnifying objects. Okay. So, humans have been asking for millennia, where does new life come from? So the religion, philosophy, and sciences have all wrestled with this question. One of the oldest explanation was um, the theory of spontaneous generation. So, which can be traced back to the ancient Greeks and was widely accepted through the Middle Ages. So, the Greek philosopher Aristotle, the one that in your screen, was one of the earliest recorded scholars to articulate the theory of spontaneous generation. So the notion that life can arise from non-living matter. Aristotle proposed that life arose from non-living material if the material contained that pneuma or the vital heat that he is trying to say. Next. So, according to the great philosopher Aristotle, the one that I flashed the screen a while ago, living beings are born from similar organisms, but sometimes they can also be generated from inert material or matter. So all things, in fact, have a passive element. What's this passive element? Passive element, which is their matter, and an active element, which is their shape, meaning a sort of inner force which gives the matter its shape. So, for example, clay is a non-living matter, right? So that has an active element which enables it to shape inert material into a living being, such as, for example, a worm or a frog. So he first experiments to prove the spontaneous generation theory were done in the, I think it is 17th century, in a doctor called John Baptist van Helmont. So, who he is? Sino ba siya? Sino si Van Helmont? Ano yung distribution or contribution niya dun sa theory of spontaneous generation? Ayan. So, what he did is, he placed a dirty shirt together with some weight, and according to him, mice were born 21 days later. So, according to the Dr. John Baptist van Helmont, the sweat is the shirt. The sweat in the shirt was the active element which gave life to the inert matter. So out of these shirts and weight, there will be a mouse that evolve. Okay. So, the first serious attack on the idea of spontaneous generation was made in 1668 by Francesco Redi. So, he is an Italian physician and a poet. And at that time, it was widely held that maggots arose spontaneously in rotting meat. So Reddy believed that maggots developed from eggs laid by flies. Okay, so to test his hypothesis, he set out meat in a variety of flasks. So some open to the air, some sealed completely, and others covered with a gauze. Ayan. So as he had expected, maggots appeared only in the open flasks, in which the flies could reach the meat and lay their eggs. This was one of the first examples of an experiment in the modern sense in which controls are used. In spite of his well-executed experiment, the belief in spontaneous generation remained strong, and even Reddy continued to believe it occurred under some circumstances. So, the debate over spontaneous generation continued for centuries. So, in 1745, John Needham, he is an English clergyman. So what he proposed is, he considered a definite experiment. Everyone knew that boiling killed microorganisms. So he proposed to test whether or not microorganisms appeared spontaneously after boiling. So he boiled a chicken broth, put it into a flask, then he sealed it and waited. So, sure enough, microorganisms grew. So, Needham claimed a victory for spontaneous generation. Ayan. So, sino naman itong si Lazarus Palenzi? So, he is an Italian priest. So Lazarus Palenzi was not convinced, and he suggested that perhaps the microorganisms had entered the broth from the air after the broth was boiled, but before it was sealed. Yan. So to test this theory, he modified Needham's experiments. So, ayan. So what he did is, he placed the chicken broth in a flask. Then he sealed the flask, drew off the air to create a partial vacuum, then boiled the broth. So no microorganisms grew. So proponents of spontaneous generation argued or argued that Palenzi had only proven that spontaneous generation could not occur without air. Ayan. Next is, ayan. So, the theory of spontaneous generation was finally laid to rest in 1859 by the young French chemist, no other than Louis Pasteur. So, who is Louis Pasteur? So, the French Academy of Sciences sponsored a contest. Ayan. See, they sponsored a contest for the best experiment, either proving or disproving spontaneous generation. So, Pasture's winning experiment was a variation of the methods of Needham and Spallanzani or Spallanzani. He boiled meat broth in a flask. So what he did is he heated the neck of the flask in a flame until it became pliable and bent it into the shape of an S. Ayan. So kung ma-observe ninyo dito sa illustration sa ating slide deck. So just observe how Louis Pasteur shaped that flask into a letter S. So bakit nga kaya shinape ang flask or ang mouth ng flask ng ganong shape? Why? Ayan. So air could enter the flask but not and so air could enter the flask, but airborne or airborne microorganisms grow. And so air could enter the flask, but airborne microorganism could not. Ayan. So they would settle by gravity in the neck. So as Pasteur had expected, no microorganisms grew. So when Pasteur tilted the flask so that the broth reached the lowest point in the neck where any airborne particles were have settled. So the broth rapidly became cloudly with life. So Pasteur had both refuted the theory of spontaneous generation and convincingly demonstrated that microorganisms are everywhere, even in the air. Ayan. Ayan. So how it all started. Ayan. So when Romans discovered they were able to make glass in the 1st century BC, things changed for the better. So yan. So who is Anton van Leeuwenhoek? So Anton van Leeuwenhoek made an important contribution to the development of the cell theory. So later on, you will know what is the major contribution of Anton van Leeuwenhoek to the cell theory. Ayan. Ayan. So, we have 3 tenets to the cell theory. So, we have number 1, all organisms are made of cells. And then second, all existing cells are produced by other living cells. And the last one is the cell is the most basic unit of life. Ayan. So we have 5 contributors to the cell theory. We have Robert Hooke, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. Third one is Matthias Kleeton. And Fourth one is Tudor Swan. And last one is Rudolph Virtuo. So what do you think are their major contributions to the cell theory? Okay. So let's move on. So the first one is Robert Hooke. So who is Robert Hooke? So the first time, ayan. So who is Robert Hooke? So the first time the word cell was used to refer to these tiny units of life was in um, 1665 by a British scientist named Robert Hooke. So Hooke was one of the earliest scientists to study living things under a microscope. So the microscopes of his day were not very strong. Ayan, but Hooke was still able to make an important discovery. When he looked at a thin slice of cork under his microscope, he was surprised to see what looked like a honeycomb. So Hooke made a drawing in the figure below to show what he saw. So in your screen is the sample cork. Ayan yung ginamit niya at yan yung kanyang kinat into a piece. Then, yan yung nilagay niya sa kanyang microscope. Yan yung pinaka-material na in-observe niya under his microscope. Ayan. So, kinompare ni Hooke yung nakita niyang illustration or nakita niyang specimen sa microscope, kinompare niya into a rooms in a monastery. Excuse me. Ayan. Ayan. Excuse me. So in your screen is the Hooke's observation. So yan bali yung nakita niya dun sa kanyang microscope. Yan ang pinaka-itsura nung piece ng cork na kinat niya sa maliit na parte. And doon naman sa isang illustration, yan yung ginamit niyang microscope. Ayan. So, that is the microscope that he used during that time. Ayan. So, so soon after Robert Hooke discovered cells in cork, Anton van Dijk in Holland made other important discoveries using a microscope. So Leeuwenhoek made his own microscope lenses, and he was so good at it that his microscope was more powerful than other microscopes of his day. So in fact, Leeuwenhoek's microscope was almost as strong as modern light microscopes. And using his microscope, Leeuwenhoek was the first person to observe human cells and bacteria. Ayan. Ayan. So these are the observations of Anton van Leeuwenhoek. And the other illustration was the microscope that he used during that time. Ayan. So let's move on with Matthias Kleeton. So who is Matthias Kleeton? So Matthias Kleeton is a German botanist. So he concluded that all plant tissues are composed of cells. and that an embryonic plant arose from a single cell. So he declared that the cell is the basic building block of all plant matter. So this statement of Kleeton was the first generalizations concerning cells. Ayan. And now, ayan, who is Tudor Swan naman? So Swan proposed three generalizations concerning the nature of cells. So first is animals and plants consists of cells plus the secretions of cells. Yan. Then second, these cells have independent lives, which third are subject to the organism's life. So, ayan. So he studied plant and animal cell and was intrigued by the similarities between the two. So he published the first statement of the cell theory, which is all living things are made of cells and cell products. So who is Rudolph Virtuo or Rudolph Ludwig Karl Virtuo? So he was a German physician. He is also anthropologist. He is also a pathologist during his time, also a prehistorian. He is also a biologist slash writer slash editor slash he is also a politician. So, siya yung taong maraming slash. So, he is known as the father of modern pathology. Ayan. So, and he is also the founder of, what do you call this? He is also a founder of the social medicine. And to his colleagues during that time, he is the Pope of Medicine. Ayan. So based on his investigations and experiments, he stated that all cells from pre-existing cells, which is the second part of the cell theory, all existing cells are produced by other living cells. Ayan. So after Virchow completed his work, the cell theory was finally formulated in 1838. Ayan. Ayan. So just a recap, kindly take down notes mga anak, all the important terms and the contributors, the people under the cell theory, and what are their contributions. Okay. Okay. So that would be all for today. I hope you obtained and gained enough knowledge regarding the key points of cell theory. Thank you for your time and effort of listening this video lesson from the very beginning up to the last. And that's it. So this is Miss May. And I will leave you this statement. Always remember that you are amazing. Thank you, and God bless everyone.